Hi everybody, FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos here for ChessLecture.com, and we continue with our little series, our mini-series within the bigger series. The mini-series being on Kramnik, the larger series on World Chess Champions. So last time we took a look at a smooth, typically positional performance by Kramnik in defeating Viswanathan Anand with white in a Catalan. This time too, we're going to see a very impressive performance by Kramnik against another great player, Magnus Carlsen. You know, Carlsen was not 2,800 at the time of this game. He was on the verge of 2,700 at the moment. This was played in the Amber Tournament, rapid event back in 2007. But nevertheless, Carlsen was still extremely strong. And I should say that Kramnik has beaten him since then, too. I mean, he's beaten the 2,800 of Carlsen as well. But nevertheless, of course, this isn't Carlsen as we know him now. But still, he was a very, very strong player. And the impressive, or I should say, the fault, if you will, of Carlsen's loss is with Kramnik, who played a fantastic game and came up with a tremendous novelty. It wasn't that Carlsen did anything really obviously wrong. All right, well, let's have a look. So Kramnik had white, and as I mentioned at the end of the last time, Kramnik, of course, has this reputation, especially, I think, obtained in the period after the match with Kasparov and then in the mid-2000s, when he really worked hard to solidify his style, in part as a reaction to Kasparov. I mean, it's hard to outdo Kasparov when it comes to just pure sharp chess. So Kramnik really worked very, very hard on the technical aspects of the game. And I think it maybe got a bit exaggerated. But typically, I mean, when he was younger, really through the period where he was, becoming world champion, and again now, the last 4 or 5 years, he is quite adept at playing sharp chess. So I would say he plays correct chess. He's not trying to disturb the balance, as you say, with as a player like Mikhail Tal does. And with black especially, his repertoire is a bit more solid than Kasparov. Kasparov played the Najdorf. But nevertheless, Kramnik wins a lot of very sharp games and often will play these very dynamic concepts in the opening. So we're going to have a look at that in this one. So knight c3, d5, d4. So we're now in a queen's gambit. Black takes. And this is something called the Vienna variation. It's a very, very sharp and entertaining line. A lot of theory, a lot of things that can be done here. I think black often plays c5 at this point. But, okay, there's also b5, and this is what Carlsen shows, holding on to the pawn. All right, so a4, c6, e5, h6. Okay, these are all forced moves here. Takes, 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 rook g8, and now g3. So, again, there's a lot that can be said by way of theory, but essentially the idea is pretty clear at this point. So what's white going to do with this light squared bishop? There's nothing for it to do on e2, but on g2, then, in conjunction with a move like e5, you can see there's a lot of pressure here. So it's, again, kind of a Catalan bishop at work. And meanwhile, black is going to try to achieve c5 when he can. And he does it quickly. Bishop to b7, bishop g2, and now c5. So he doesn't want to wait around for knight to e5 to happen when it'll be very difficult for him to unravel that mass over there. So he's going to just let the b-pawn go its way. The g-pawn will fall later. But meanwhile, he seizes the open diagonal and starts to put pressure on white's right center here. All right, Kramnik castles. I mean, g4 was at least a semi-threat, not something that he really wanted to worry about. And Carlsen plays g4 anyway. Now, the obvious move here is knight h4, and this is what had been played, and it's still sometimes played too. And white's results here actually have been pretty good. So this line is very risky for black. But after Kramnik's move, it turns out that it's even riskier. So he plays a takes b5. Really, really a great idea. But it looks surprising. I mean, who cares about the b-pawn? Why is this important? What's the big idea? Well, you'll see that the tactics all work here, and it's really fantastic. So after a takes b5, all the games since this game have seen black play rook takes g7 instead of taking the knight. But even so, white seems to be doing well here. So just to give a little bit of analysis on what I think is the best line. Knight e5, bishop g2, king g2, c takes d4, queen a4, and the idea is to not just to threaten the bishop, but to play b6 and Well, if the king moves, then there's b7, and if the knight moves, then at the very least you'll end up taking on a7. So after this, black can choose between dc3 and bishop takes c3. So for dc3, I think white obtains a winning advantage. You can check that out in the PGN file. So I think bishop c3 is best. And here, b6 check, king f8. Here, b7 is nothing special, though, because of queen d. So b takes c3, queen takes b6, queen c4, queen check, king g1, knight to d7. I think this is about the best that black can do, but he's worse here, and in fact, in 2 previous games, black has lost from this position. So this is all very, very dangerous for him. Okay, back to this position here after a takes b5. Another try is bishop takes c3. But here too, white seems to be fine. So b takes c3, take the knight. Okay, white just takes, and it's surprising. I mean, it looks like, you know, black should be absolutely terrific here, but he's not. So takes. Now, if knight to d7, then rook f to d1 proves remarkably difficult for black to cope with. The threat is simply d takes c5. And then once that happens, then c6, obviously. Well, what does black do? Even if he moves the knight away, you know, d takes c5 and just this massive pawns. I mean, white's got extra pawns on the king side. He's got extra pawns on the queen side. It's tough. Black also can't move his queen off the back rank because the rook on a8 is hanging. If he plays something like rook to c8, so we can play dc5, rook c5, well, then the problem is that, I'm not sure if, yeah, we should just take, and then rook a7. So this is also pretty wretched. I mean, maybe black is okay, although I kind of doubt it. Takes here, and we're threatening maybe to play rook a8. Also, you know, just this b pawn may start to go at some moment too. So this is pretty miserable for black as well. All right, so Carlsen decided that he would just take on f3, bishop f3, takes. Now, if bishop takes c3, white could play b takes c3 and transpose into what we just looked at. Oh, there's a line in that I neglected to mention, so I'm going to return to this here quickly. So I just talked about knight to d7, rook f to d1. But black could also try queen to d5. In this case, white just plays patiently, just trades queens, and plays d takes c5. Materially, black is okay. It's 3 pawns for a piece, but the g pawn is going to drop. But these 2 pawns here are a real problem for black to deal with. b6, you know, is a threat as well. So rook takes g7, rook f to e1, still another idea, king d7, and now rook a to d1. So these guys just keep the black pieces on the queen side restricted, threats simply to take. You know, rook to g5, you can chase them off of the